One of my backers from Subscribestar asked me to make this video, so do not get alarmed when you see that the date is from June the 2nd, 2023. I know that a couple of months on the internet seem like decades, but everything I will say here is still relevant because the podcast is still going and the leftists are still seething on Twitter about it. And when I first saw this, I was like, well, the New York Post? Really? Like, why is it on the New York Post? I remember seeing it on Vice magazine, and then you realize, oh, they copied each other's homework. They didn't even try to change it a little bit so the teacher doesn't catch on it. Well, peak journalism. The idea is that they're not writing these articles in order to make money or anything like that. They're writing it to attack the show. They don't like the fact that there's a different audience, that people are choosing to watch YouTube rather than read their garbage. So they got to take it down a peg. So they write these hit pieces in the hopes that the channel may be demonetized or that YouTube will take steps. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it didn't work, which I'm glad. But I find it interesting, the morality of it. There used to be a show when I grew up called Jackass, and that show made fun of men. And no one had a problem with it. In fact, most shows that I watched made fun of men. There was a TV show called Married with Children. The Simpsons makes fun of men. And these are scripted shows. They're not interviews or podcasts. It's just like someone writes a fictional character that happens to be a man, and he ends up being as the butt end of all jokes. And despite all that, I couldn't find the Vice articles talking about it. I couldn't find the New York Post articles talking about it. It's very interesting. Like, men can be criticized, men can be made fun of. But when it comes to women in modern culture, there is absolutely no criticism because they're already perfect. Just like Hollywood wants them to be. They're absolutely perfect. There's no problem whatsoever. And in the unlikely event that there is a problem, it's somehow men's fault or society's fault. And this is incredibly harmful and toxic, by the way. Like, I'm actually glad that I'm getting criticized as a man because you cannot grow as a person if you never get criticism. Like, if you take a child and its parents never criticize what that child does, right? Like, they never say anything negative about him, that they never chastise him when he does something wrong. Whenever something bad happens, it's never his fault. What type of child will they grow up being? They're probably going to grow up as a person that's incredibly vain, incredibly self-centered, incredibly narcissistic, incredibly toxic, because they never got criticized. It's not really their fault when you think about it. It is society's fault, as they like to say. But seriously, like think about it. Is there any single criticism that modern culture has for women? The only time I heard it was when J.D. Vance talked about cat ladies and everyone freaked out. It's like, how dare you say that? Like, no, you shouldn't. Horrible. And this is why they're upset at this podcast, because while the podcast itself isn't actually criticizing women, but because they're inviting certain types of women and allowing them to speak is very problematic. They can't articulate why it's problematic, but it is problematic. I don't find anything problematic with this podcast, by the way, because the women that go there know exactly what they're going into. Believe it or not, they're consenting adults. They can vote. So they can also sign contracts. They can sign business contracts, and they know where they're going. And the reason they go there is to get more followers. Most of the ladies that go there are only fangirls, so they want exposure. Like, they're consenting to that. And honestly, I know this is shocking, especially coming from me, but I do think some of them fake being stupid. Not all, but like some of them, I definitely think they're faking being stupid, because if they fake being stupid, the clip goes viral, and if the clip goes viral, people watch it, and it's like, wow, this lady has some nice titties, and she's got an OnlyFans, and they subscribe, and it's good for her business. That's why they go there. They want the exposure. So, trust me, like, some of them are a little bit more wise and cunning than you may think. Others, not so much. I agree. I have seen certain things that it's difficult to fake. But again, there is no other explanation. Like, why would you go on a podcast when you know people are going to make fun of you? Unless you want the exposure, and unless you're okay with people making fun of you so that the clip goes viral. And I also watch what they also say on social media, because like some of them said something really stupid in the podcast, and I was like, okay, well, What else do they say? And you go on their Twitter and you realize, oh no, they're actually a very smart person. So unless someone else writes their Twitter, I guess like that's also a possibility. They may have faked their moment of stupidity just to get the attention. But what I find this distasteful is to say that making women look dumb, right? So like removing agency from women, like no one is making them look dumb. There is no script there. There is no one telling them what to say. Like they're basically going on the podcast and speaking for themselves. Imagine if they said this about, I don't know, Donald Trump when he makes a gaffe. It's like, oh, the press is making Donald Trump look dumb. It's like, doesn't make sense, right? Like, he wanted to be a politician. He wanted to be in front of the cameras. If he said the gaffe, that's on him. Like, stop taking agency from adults. Stop coddling adults. It's disturbing. The second one is making women, right? Like, all of them. No, I'm sorry. Not all of them. Not all of them. Like, there is a particular subsection that is being invited on the show, and they are the ones that are saying stupid things. None of the women in my life behave that way. None of the women in my life would go on such a show, and none of the women in my life would do what those women do. So, like, stop saying that it's all women, because it's not. And also, on that show, there are women that are smart, and they're also making fun of the other ones that aren't very bright. But, as I mentioned before, no one is forcing anyone to go to this show. Like, they choose to do that. They know what the show is about. And the thing that they hate is the popularity. And the reason the show is popular is built on supply and demand. Single thing you read, every single thing you see says that women are girl bosses, right? You go and watch a Hollywood movie, girl bosses. You watch a TV show, girl bosses. And the problem with this, right, is that in the academia, they genuinely believe that if you see girl bosses everywhere, you will honestly believe that women are girl bosses, which is probably why a lot of people are upset on Twitter that when a woman is harmed in public, no one wants to intervene and help her. Like the other day, there was also a lady, she wanted to carry an air conditioning all the way up to her room and no man wanted to help. Like maybe the girl boss is working, right? Like maybe you have brainwashed people into believing that it is like everyone is just a girl boss. Like Captain Marvel. I don't fucking know. But all jokes aside, the people in the academia that came up with this are mentally deficient. It just doesn't work that way. Like, let's assume that everywhere I look, I see girl bosses. And this podcast wouldn't exist. And whenever I go online, whenever I open my TV, girl bosses everywhere. The problem with this is that I also go outside. You know, when they tell you on Twitter to touch grass, I do touch the grass. Yes, I do touch it. And I see how women act in real life. And my brain is a little bit more developed than that of an American university professor that's left-leaning. And I understand, okay, so that was fantasy. And what I'm seeing in my life is reality. So you actually notice that, well, women in real life, they behave like human beings. They don't behave like Hollywood caricatures. They also cry, they have sensuality, they have cuteness, some of them may be obnoxious, they have personality flaws, they're not what Hollywood tried to tell me, right? So, when you realize this disconnect, you're going to side with reality. You're not going to side with Hollywood and fantasy, you're going to side with the real world. And then you're going to wonder, why is it that anyone in Hollywood is absolutely incapable of showing reality the way it is, with the qualities and the flaws? Why do they always ignore every single flaw and they just focus on the qualities? So when you have a podcast that's a little bit more real and is showing how things are in real life rather than what's supposed to be in Hollywood, people gravitate towards it. That's why it's so popular, because it's things that if you were to say, you would get a community guideline strike violation. Like if you were to say women act the way they act in this podcast, you would be called a misogynistic pig. But then you actually get to see the podcast. No one forces them to behave in this way. No one tells them to act in this way. And yet they do. And the clips go viral because people share them and they're like, yeah, I mean, I saw this in real life. I mean, it makes sense, right? Look, this lady is a gold digger. Like, she doesn't care about men at all. She thinks that everyone that donates to her are pay piggies. And she said this herself. So, It's like, well, this is what I thought. Like some people genuinely think like this. But if I was to say it, then immediately I would be called a misogynist. But well, in this case, she said it, so I can share the clip. This is why it's vital. You shouldn't blame the people making the podcast. You should blame Hollywood and the media entertainment system that is constantly creating this fake illusion that a demographic is perfect and has no criticism that can be leveled to it, and all of the people that are part of that demographic are perfect in every way, because it's not real. People go outside and they realize they're human beings. They're not angels or fairies or mythical creatures. Like, no, they have qualities, but they also have flaws, and you shouldn't ignore one of them. And this is also why anime is quite popular. What's the name of that isekai? Konosuba, right? Like, everyone likes Aqua. Aqua's design isn't that interesting, right? But the personality is what makes it interesting. She feels more human than any of the Hollywood characters. This is why anime is becoming more popular. Same with VTubers. Like, you see women like Pipkin Pippa, and she talks about her rotten teeth, and she talks about her flaws, and she talks about other things, which humanizes the person. It makes them feel like, okay, well, they're relatable. Yeah, I have problems like this as well. Not as bad as she does, but like... So, like, people start relating. It actually humanizes. When you make every single woman a girl boss, and you're trying to create this mythos that none of them have any flaws, or... You're going to create something that's not relatable. This is why a lot of Hollywood movies suck, by the way. They can't make good characters anymore. Like, they genuinely, I'm repeating myself, but they do not have flaws. It's probably, also part of the inclusivity, because if you have a female character with flaws, then they will say, oh, so you're saying that all women are... Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.